There are undoubtedly going to be jobs that are swallowed, but I don't believe it's displacement. I think it is an opportunity to transform and convert skill sets, whether that be in data, whether that be in sales.
Scott Sampson. Scott he's had an amazing career within B2B sales for the last 20 years. He's now moving into the founder space, and he's founding a company called Autonomic, which is essentially going to be offering AI GTM systems.
61% of B2B buyers prefer a rep-free buying experience. Data integrity is now, I believe, the kind of competitive moat that I don't think every leader has fully clocked. For me, it will multiply whatever's underneath it. Automation on top of bad data or undercooked processes is just a faster way of processing something that's broken. You've got to get the underlying data and the underlying process and the desired outcome right first.
There's more AI tools coming out than ever before, and it just kind of keeps happening. And even people like yourself who are involved in this must still sometimes struggle to feel like you're, staying ahead of what's going on. Do you have kind of one AI tool at the moment that you're finding yourself going back to and using, over and over again in your daily work?
Yeah, so I use a few tools daily, predominantly, and this won't be revolutionary. In the main, I use Claude over and over again. A lot of people will, but increasingly with what I'm doing myself at the moment, I'm also using Claude Console, getting a bit more technical and a bit more granular. I think that probably for me, like the honest answer is it's not necessarily about the tool, it's kind of more about the posture, I would say. So I'm very definitely treating AI as a coworker rather than a search engine and rather than an automator of admin.
That's really interesting. Because, a lot of the time, especially people are trying to just use it to automate. And obviously automation was something that, kind of came before. And there's a lot of things that were doing that before this kind of AI run sort of came round. How have you seen, as AI has become more and more prevalent in the last couple of years, how have you seen it start to affect workflows actually, like on the ground, for yourself working, as an operator or, with founders, anything like that? How have you seen that go? Is there a push towards people just sort of using it to automate and using it as essentially an echo chamber? Or are you finding that other people are kind of starting to use it as a co-worker now, like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be examples across the spectrum, I guess, as with any early adoption, and some of that adoption is going to be great by design, some of it's going to be great by discovery, and some of it's going to be flawed. So, I mean, there are a number of people on LinkedIn, on different social channels that have great use cases and demonstrated really valuable tools. But one thing I'm seeing a lot of, it's I don't think it's controversial to say that everybody is talking about this, right? There's a lot of noise out there about it. I am seeing a lot of evidence of people using the tools just to do or perform the same processes faster, rather than deploying it in a kind of agentic against its agentic capability to be, as I said before, like properly a coworker, right? What's really interesting, and this is not my personal opinion. This is based on 2025 Gartner research, which said 61% of B2B buyers prefer a rep-free buying experience. And so I think the opportunity there for GTM is I don't believe is to replace sales reps, but I think that stat comes as a result of the experience rather than a true desire for people not to have to deal with people. Nobody is a more fervent believer or more passionate about sales or about the experience salespeople can give purchasers than I am. But I really feel like there is a strong opportunity in GTM and in the market to deploy the tech against tasks that we are not really capable of doing ourselves, or certainly not at the speed that AI can support with. And I think really for me, I think the reason that that's important is I think the hype about AI is a bit overcooked, right? The change underneath the hype is the part that's undercooked. And where I'm seeing the issues come about, and certainly with kind of founders and business leaders I've been speaking to recently, and this is like a new world for me in terms of that being my day to day, but is that automation on top of bad data or undercooked processes is just a faster way of processing something that's broken. You've got to get the underlying data and the underlying process and the desired outcome right first.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, kind of focusing on the fundamentals is a huge part of it. And through the, other people I've had on the podcast, that's been a fairly consistent conversation. It is this idea of throwing a stack of AI tools on top of a GTM system or a sales system that effectively hasn't been implemented properly, whether it's the individual reps aren't getting the support and coaching that they need, the sales leaders aren't being empowered to actually implement what they want to be doing. That there's so many kind of reasons to that. Can you maybe speak to a couple of those reasons and why you think so many people sort of overcomplicate go to market and where they can start? Say someone, is starting to put together this. Where is the best place to get started? Where are those kind of loopholes where you find, performance tends to kind of break down? And what are those initial tools to get going?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, so just to underline how passionately I believe that this opportunity is not only in front of us, but that it is going to be transformational and generational. And AI is clearly at the center of how I'm going about doing that. But I think without being oversimplistic, and my entire career, 20 years, in B2B SaaS predominantly, the mistake I've seen and I've made myself, I've seen others make, I've failed to stop others making it sometimes, and then at various times really, really accelerated businesses working through some of these mistakes, is that it's a little bit, and I kind of hate to draw on the sports analogy, but for anyone that plays like, tennis or rows or cycles or plays golf, the fundamentals are, and the basics of like setup and posture dictate everything that comes after it, right? I'm a golfer, don't play tennis, right? But you can't make a great serve or you can't hit a great drive if you're aiming in the wrong direction or you're over the line, right? So for me, the GTM equivalent of that is the data. It's the process. It's, what is the customer experience? Who is the customer? And the number of businesses that when you really get into it and ask them to pinpoint and narrow down who their customer is, where they meet them, and what the pain they solve is, you will get as many answers to those questions as people you ask. Now that's, and again, it's not revolutionary. ICP, customer journey, pain points, metrics. If you're a medic house, none of these things are fundamental, but people get carried away with the shiny new object that can do things at speed. And I'm not saying that's an exhaustive list, by the way. There are lots of other issues, whether it's down to kind of CAC or are you playing in the right vertical, all these areas that will be peculiar and specific to a business. But without getting those fundamentals right, without having that data and that structural integrity, AI on top of it isn't AI. It's just bad data at machine speed.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually something we discussed yesterday, wasn't it? When we were, talking about getting this on, and, when they build workflows on this contradictory data, that is a dangerous thing to do. And especially given, again, there's so much noise around this, and we've seen whether it's with ChatGPT or even with Claude, like so many of these tools do tend to hallucinate a little bit. So if they're hallucinating as well on top of data that is kind of contradictory, I imagine that is a really, really bad framework to get started on.
It is. And the absolute best way, and you can scare yourself if you're a founder or a sales leader or a salesperson, using Claude or using other natural language AI models are available. But it's an exciting time, right? But I'll give you an example. One of my best mates play golf with him regularly, and we spend most of the time around the golf course talking about sales and the craft of sales, and both of us love it. His business has started deploying AI at a pretty breakneck speed, and they are getting certain areas of it more right than I think a lot of businesses are. in that there's consistency with the models being used for specific purposes and the way in which the models are being used. But we ran a great experiment just on our phones with the same baseline material and just prompting Claude with slightly different prompts, and the variance in the quality of the output was unbelievable. But what's actually interesting is you can test this yourself. So even if you build an exceptional prompt, it could be analyze a sales call, for example. Stop the prompt, kill the message, and restart it. But wait long enough to see the initial processing and the ideas that Claude will come up with, because you see the real time processing and the real time kind of thinking as it happens. But one of the other ways that you could do it is actually wait until you start to see the answer and the response being generated. If you're creating a document, for example, stop it before the document gets spat out. Remember what you've seen on the screen and rerun it, and you will see a drastically different answer on the same prompt. And I think that should be enough for people to realize that it's not actually, I mean, for a lot of businesses, speeding up day-to-day processes or document creation or data analysis, forecasting, whatever it might be, it is a huge improvement to do this stuff 10 times faster. But very quickly, I believe businesses are going to see that with different people within the business deploying different skill levels of prompting or using the same models for different purposes, we're actually going to see businesses generate more data that is less validated and has more compliance risk, than we are going to see the benefit of the time saving. So I think thinking about it sort of through that lens and really testing the quality of the output and the variation of the quality of the output is enough reason that people should really be thinking about deploying this over a slightly longer period of time, but for a more compounding and a better uplift in productivity over time.
Do you think that's going to lead to kind of new job roles being created to sort of manage this? Or do you think sales teams, whether it's reps, SDRs, A's, I'm not sure where it may look like, even the sales leaders, are they going to end up having to kind of absorb this into part of their sort of daily workflow? Because it sounds like it's going to be a fairly significant role to actually go in and start kind of managing this and making sure that the hygiene is all kind of working properly of all this data and all the tools attached to it. Do you think there'll be a role coming in for that?
I think there will be a division. There'll be an
Right.
organization or a business unit more than there'll be a role. And actually, I think this might a lot of businesses. I mean, it's obviously going to depend the stage of the business, right? If you're kind of pre-seed or Series A, and that you're the founder, but you're also the HR director, you're the SDR, you're the seller, you're the product manager. Yeah, we've all either seen or know or have been in businesses like that. I don't think this is going to apply there, but my view is that this will be as, if not more, revolutionary than the inception of RevOps, GTM ops, because I'm old enough to remember when that wasn't really a thing. And it is now one of the most technically proficient, impressive professions that there is. I've met some incredible people in RevOps, and the clarity, the breadth and depth of thinking and the impact that they can have, I personally believe is actually quite undersung. So I don't think it's right that there will be, and I think there is an assumed absorption of AI functionality, and I think there is some responsibility that at the moment should sit with RevOps. But for me personally, I've just started a business, and if that business grows to being big enough to justify it, I would personally be aiming to have an AI deployment team as well. But the validation or the reasoning I would give for that is, this is quite a staggering stat, but Pavilion with Ebsta ran some research last year, and again, B2B SaaS, 76% of AEs missed quota in H1 of 2025. This is like a staggering amount. And so my view is, if you can get the processes right and you can get the output right and you can enhance and accelerate your sales experience, your sales execution, all those things that go with better performance, I think it's actually an opportunity to create jobs, to improve the performance, improve the development of people who sell, in order to produce more revenue, because I can't think of a CRO who would say no to more revenue. And if they would, they're probably not going to be a CRO for long. And all joking aside, revenue at quality and with capital efficiency, clearly, there is such a thing as bad revenue. But for me, I think it shouldn't just be an idea that creates jobs. We should be architecting and designing the AI enabling sales, revenue, customer success, organizational or divisional unit of the future.
And what do you think that looks like on the ground? I know you've spoken, to me about this idea of like agentic GTM teams. Do you envision that kind of sitting alongside a human GTM team and supporting that? I heard this really interesting kind of contradictory idea. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent, Scott, but someone was speaking the other day about everyone's so terrified about AI agents and all this coming in to kind of actually steal jobs. But a lot of people were saying, no, what it's actually going to do is empower each individual human operator or human employee to suddenly have the power of 5 people. So actually and this is maybe a more positive, dare I say, naive way of looking at it, but rather than actually people losing their jobs, there's going to be the same amount of people, but the companies are going to end up being more successful because they can be more productive. I realize I've just asked you 2 questions there, but maybe start on the latter there. Like, have you heard people talking about that kind of thing? And then after that, let's get into the idea of sort of agentic GTM.
Yeah, I definitely have. I think there is relatively widespread anxiety about what AI means, particularly in sales, but I think in broader professions as well. My brother, for example, is he may well not listen to this, so he might kill me if he hears this what he does. But so he's a data scientist. He's at Monzo, and the speed with which he, without AI, to be clear, has developed his thinking, and for context, he retrained 10 or so years ago. He went through, he was a Big Four, went through accountancy for years, and was going down the finance track and retrained, and he's the master's and a PhD in data. He's taught himself to code. He builds apps all the time. The stuff that he does is great. And I think talking to him, you could really understand why people in that kind of field, where the baseline of output, yes, and I'm going to oversimplify this, based on modeling and predictive analytics, etc., the baseline of everything they do is understanding and reading data and making a high trust transactional recommendation on the basis of that analysis, and that analysis is a skill. You can really understand in that kind of area where people start to get quite fearful. But I think it's important to remember that we generally tend to fear the unknown. People talk about you suffer more in imagination than in reality, and I do think that there is a part of that. There are undoubtedly going to be jobs that are swallowed, but I don't believe it's displacement. I think it is an opportunity to transform and convert skill sets, whether that be in data, whether that be in sales. And actually, I think that the teams who embrace the AI enablement, velocity, and I think depth of thinking, but use that to empower the human relationship and the human conversation, will be the ones that win over the next 2 to 3 years. So I don't know that I also displayed a little bit of a tangent. Maybe it's in our national DNA to do good. That. But does that answer the first
Absolutely.
question?
No, you've 100%. I think it's just such an interesting point, and realistically, I feel like we'd be doing a disservice having this conversation about AI and not kind of addressing that, because I think that's kind of the elephant in the room for most people, whether it's within sales or, as you said, any other industry, is this worry of I'm going to kind of lose my livelihood to this thing. But and especially and it'd be great to get into that now. This idea of like, I'm still fairly new to this whole GTM machine. I'm only a couple of years in, but already there's so much has changed, and suddenly it's agentic GTM teams coming in and being able to take all this on. But I don't know, maybe I'm living it glass half full, but I'm kind of viewing it as like just so much more productivity on my end and being able to achieve so much more, rather than the robots are coming to steal my job. So I'd love to get, because I know you're far closer to this and far more experienced. So can you get into a bit more about, what a kind of agentic GTM team looks like, both for teams, but also for kind of individual operators as well?
Yeah, I think it's probably important to start with what agentic is and what it isn't.
Please do. Yeah.
In terms of an agentic team. So and it doesn't necessarily mean that there is or isn't a place for one or the other. There is in various parts of the business. But in my view, and this is my view, an agentic team is one or several agents with, and it might sound counterintuitive, with a defined job description and list of tasks with underlying rationale and success metrics and measurables that each each agent in that team should deliver. And secondly, and I think most importantly, in order for it to be an agentic team, they have to have with control, and some of them might be 100%, some of them might be less, autonomy, with a human filter, but crucially, an ability to interact with other systems in a two-way unprompted fashion. And that could be with another agent. I mean, I've designed 3 different teams that I think almost in a kind of pick and mix format can be deployed into different businesses. Every business is going to have its own pain points and its own problems. And I think for me, an agentic team is one that can be deployed in that way, and can be utilized and tailored in order to solve unique problems or unique challenges or opportunities within a business. What it is not for me is a workflow automation tool. We've had those for years, right? It's very useful to have a kind of boilerplate tone of voice template design for proposal, for client engagement documentation, and to use AI in order to speed up that process, for sure. Don't for a second think that I'm saying don't do that. But I'm seeing and hearing a lot of people talk about deploying agency with AI, but what they're actually doing is just doing things faster. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not agentic in my view. And the reason I'm passionate about this is that I would say the thread that has gone through my entire career has been, and I haven't always known this, but the thing that makes me happy at work is knowing I've either been a part of or been able to help somebody else develop a skill or do something one day that they woke up not knowing that they could achieve, whether that's through sales coaching or whether that's just through giving them an idea and letting them iterate on it. And that's led to me having a passion for coaching and development all the way through. And for me, I really, really strongly feel, and just coming back to that previous question, that the opportunity here is to do all the things that are low value and to do all of the things that with the right agency, AI can do faster and probably with better quality at speed than we can, in order to free humans up to have the human conversation or apply human judgment or be creative within the scope of the brand, for example. And there's loads and loads of other examples. But the reason I think that opportunity is there is, I'll give you another couple of stats. So bearing in mind that stat about H1 2025 and 75% of quota carriers missing their number, is incredible to me. And this has been true for years, going back to the time I worked with Tom and Shelley at Jiminy, a sales coaching and revenue intelligence tool, that 73% of sales managers, this stat has been true for more than 10 years, spend less than 5% of their time coaching. Which is just insane to me. And for people and I might be sounding a little bit critical of the people that I'm most passionate about, but we really got to consider how much effort and time are we putting into delivering the exact thing that we all talk about wanting to be great at delivering, right? So if 3/4 of reps are missing their number and 3/4 of managers are spending less than 5% of their time, I mean, what is that? Half an hour in a week, an hour, whatever. Why are we not doing that? So for me, the opportunity is there to free up time to spend that time coaching teams. And when you consider that, on average, and again, this is not my this is not my information. This is this stat particularly is Forrester. quota carriers spend on average 18% of their time executing revenue generating activities. And bear in mind that includes sending emails. You don't actually have to improve someone's execution or someone's conversion, one of the hardest things to change. All you've got to do is get them spending literally 2, 3, 4% more of the time selling, and they will sell more. But if you can compound that with coaching, and the way I think that can be done is by freeing up vast amounts of our time with the deployment of agentic teams, but also productivity accelerators, and then there's no excuse for us not turning that 75% around.
So would you say largely the agentic GTM machine that you're speaking about there, largely that would be there and most beneficial for those sales leaders so that they can help provide more help downstream? Because this is something that's come up in the podcast quite a bit recently, is a few people I've spoken to, very big sales coaches, whether in the States or over with us in the UK. The bottleneck they've said they've noticed within sales organizations is always that sales leader. The execs and everything above it are one thing, and then the actual sales team below are another thing. But most of the time, from what they've said, is this sales leader has been promoted because they've performed very well. They've been put up into that sales leader position. They haven't then been given the coaching themselves, leadership coaching, to become an effective leader. And then, like you've just pointed out there, through no fault of their own, they don't necessarily actually have the time and the availability or the tools to be able to go through all of their team's sales calls and actually offer effective coaching, because they're busy either putting out fires from above or having to prove themselves, as a sales leader as well. Does that kind of resonate? Does that sort of make sense and go along with what you were just saying there?
It does. It does. I think it's maybe a controversial opinion.
Go for it.
We'll tell you I'm not allergic to saying controversial things, but
love it. Go for it.
I would say for a small minority, agentic GTM or AI adoption in the GTM function is working, and it's working dramatically well. For the majority, I don't think it is, and the reason we've touched on the reasons: people deploying, admin accelerators rather than autonomy and agency. Secondly, I think that challenge can be compounded by I've seen a few things on LinkedIn recently where a couple of businesses doing some great things have talked about running kind of AI sprints, and what's then started to appear is the inevitable duplication of work, or people, 10 people doing their own 10 different variations of it. And so, I spoke before about the potential data and compliance and control risk but actually, ironically, inefficiency that brings in. So for those couple of reasons are there. We've spoken about them. The other one that I am passionate about, and I've seen people, and I just flat out disagree with this, all over LinkedIn saying, comment Claude and I'll send you my playbook that will help you automate your outreach and your LinkedIn messaging. Well, apart from the quality of the message, tell me how that's any different to when people 10 years ago were automating messages just by running it through tech, and how that is going to result in anything other than the recipient not opening the message or seeing it immediately for what it is. Doesn't mean I don't think there is a time and a place for that sort of automation, but the numbers again do not lie. So Landbase did a series of benchmarks that concluded quite recently, specifically on agentic GTM tools, and the conversion uplift for well-built agentic GTM deployments on outbound, and I'm going to completely contradict myself here, are 4 to 7 times higher than they were for traditional outbound, but crucially, only when monitored by a human. When allowed to run, they were 2 times less effective than traditional human outbound. So that delta is absolutely massive. And it says to me, and it speaks to the importance of having human quality involved And for me, it's one of the reasons I have a sort of pyramid of deployment of agency, right? So like right down the bottom, you've got agentic teams that are surfacing data insights. Clearly that can be autonomous, and that can run without human intervention, but it's for human consumption. But when it comes down to sharing proposals or negotiating with a customer, you want an agent that is saying, "Hey, Sandy, I'm not sure if you remember this, but 3 calls ago, you were on the phone with Fiona, and she mentioned a budgetary constraint." Yeah, whatever. Terrible example. You want that agent to be serving you ideas you might not have remembered and helping you personalize the hook, but you're going to deliver it. And I think that's the really important part, is to make sure that it is there to serve and to surface for a human, right? And I'll give away one piece of my kind of IP is one of the, and this came out of a conversation with somebody, but one of the agents that I'm building is this is sort of in testing at the moment. Everybody who's ever worked in B2B SaaS in a sales capacity, whether CRO or whether now the CEO, the founder, an SDR, whoever it might be, will at some point have heard, talked, or complained about close loss reasons and win reasons and not having the data to feed to product, and probably lost that deal because the product was terrible, but have struggled to identify and surface compelling information to make or to support an argument. And even if they get to the point of having decent data, it's still super subjective and it's retrospective, and it's at best, a couple of months, a quarter after the fact. Your competitors have already moved ahead. So we're building and deploying an agent that surfaces that information as a customer says it, as a customer drops language in an email. And the reason that is powerful is, for you to get that information, and let's face it, we don't get that information through humans. Your people have to, pardon the French, they have to give a shit every minute of the day the same level you do. And they have to be switched on, and they have to be not hungover from the Christmas party or like whatever. So that for me is where the power in the agency should be autonomous, with an agent surfacing in a consumable way, right? But surfacing insights that tell you live what is happening with your customer. That's the sort of information that boards and investors want. Arguments break out in the boardroom that we don't, because we don't know that. And for me, teams haven't, some, as I said at the start, right? So a small minority have got that kind of agency right. But we've got to make sure that the mix of human interaction, human consumption versus, kind of machine executed is right.
Are you finding that is the same across all sort of, and I know this is a very nascent thing for you. I know you're kind of just getting started on this. So, maybe it's too early to ask this question. We'll have to do round 2 in 6 months. But are you finding this is the same across kind of a GTM? Because I know you mentioned earlier, like GTM and RevOps. Does this idea of the agentic kind of teams and stuff, does that apply into the sort of RevOps side of the business as well? Or even going as far down as like, CS within GTM as well? How, I suppose the question I'm trying to ask is, how broadly can these agentic teams be applied into an organization? Do you kind of view it at the moment just within GTM, or is that just because that's the kind of paradigm that you're working in? Or do you kind of view it as being able to be sort of across everything down the line?
I think everything down the line.
Yeah.
The sort of vector of the lens that I'm working through is GTM and GTM adjacent, because of my history as an operator. So I feel the opportunity I have is the operator experience combined with the technical know-how, or the technical delivery is really crucial, because none of them is a kind of moat, or none of them is a necessarily a massive differentiator on their own. But I think that the combination of knowing what to automate and knowing what to deliver in order to execute or accelerate a strategy is really important. And there's any number of people who are more expert in areas than I am. I have, specific areas of the revenue and the GTM function that I'd like to think I know what I'm doing with. But the reason I'm saying that is, I think there is application across any area of the particularly tech business, But I do think that you want to have somebody with the operator experience and the know-how to make the judgment call on, what to build, what to make agentic, what to automate, and for what purpose. Because it's like an old adage: if you prioritize everything, nothing's prioritized. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it can be very easy, especially with these tools. And especially what you said earlier on, the idea of having that contradictory data and stuff. You don't want to go too kind of broad and shallow, I guess. You want to get down to the bottom first and make sure that's good. We had a guy called Mark Colgan on who's, really getting into this. We actually did a webinar with him yesterday as we record. And that's another thing that he says, is making sure that you're building on a framework that isn't just going to fall apart. Effectively, it's what do they call it, like gold plated shit or whatever it is. I don't know. It's very easy to like chuck a beautiful agentic GTM thing over this and go, yeah, it's lovely. But if that framework isn't there, and if the actual team, the human team that are there, are not prepared for it and aren't properly coached on how to do it, then it's kind of going to have that opposite effect. So I guess with that in mind, final question. Is there, throughout your career, is there one specific place where you see organizations sort of consistently breaking down when it comes to like execution or their performance? Much like what I said earlier about, the sales leaders being the bottleneck, that was an example that I've heard on the podcast. But is there, whether it's the same as that or another example, but can you kind of think of one place where you've seen, execution breaking down?
Yeah. I mean, there would be themes. I think I don't think there's any necessarily kind of one specific place that I've seen things break down. But I guess at risk of sounding a little bit like a broken record here, it is for me. There are 2 or 3 areas that I think will answer your question, but just let me sort of add a little bit of a tint to that, I guess.
Sure.
Coming back to that point about the data integrity too, right? So the data integrity is now, I believe, the kind of competitive moat that I don't think every leader has fully clocked. That is not new or as a result of the AI wave. And let's be clear, it's not a trend, it's generational, and it is going to change forever how we do things. But for me, it will multiply whatever's underneath it. And if that gap is closed, whether that be clarity on, coming back to what we said at the start, who the customer is, why they buy, when they buy, what the pain they solve is, when they churn, why we've missed the biggest driver in revenue growth in our uplift, right? If that data gap is not closed, and if it is not known, and if every person in your organization is not crystal clear that that is what they're there to deliver, or that is what makes success, then you can deliver all the speed and all the automation that you want on top of it. But as I said at the start, you're just delivering crap at lightning speed. So for me, the area that I've seen teams fall down, I've run teams that have fallen down and made mistakes and then been able to learn on top of it, is clarity of purpose, clarity of outcome, clarity of metric, and the data that sits underneath it. I think you can have exceptionally talented people running very, very fast, but find themselves on a treadmill and going nowhere if you don't have that underpinning your business. And for me, that is why I've started Autonomic is the name of the business that I've started specifically to help businesses avoid those pitfalls and then realize, who knows, the acceleration they can realize if they get that right and get the agency into their business.
I love it. Scott, this has been awesome. I've loved learning all about this stuff. Like I said, even if you feel like you're at the forefront of this AI thing and you're right in the eye of the storm, it's still so hard to keep up. So it's great to have conversations with people like yourself. Where could people go if they want to find out more about what you're getting up to with Autonomic?
They can find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to autonomic.build. And at time of recording, I will aim to have it live by the time they click it.
Yeah, don't worry. You got a couple of weeks from when we're recording this. So yeah, you've got a bit of time. Yeah,
sure.
Love it, Scott. Thanks for coming on. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we will see you all for the next one.
Take care.